the discussion on crime in Milwaukee often seems to be driven by specific events or incidents that might feel especially outrageous or especially violent. We had an interesting story this week on a gentleman who was released, charged with 2 homicides, released on personal recognizance bond. Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the fallout.
Sure. So, Greg, you're exactly right. This week I wrote a story about a man charged in a double homicide, and also he was charged with shooting and wounding 3 other people in that same incident. Prosecutors felt there was obviously enough to charge the case, but as time went on, the man filed a speedy trial demand, which in Wisconsin means the trial would have to start within 90 days of that request. When prosecutors asked for more time, they were getting more evidence back. They also asked to reduce the bond. The bond was set to a signature bond, $10,000 signature bond. So if he doesn't show up for future court proceedings, he has to pay that bond amount. But prosecutors are saying, well, we don't really have, we're having witnesses changing their stories. Some of the forensic evidence we're getting back as the investigation's ongoing is contradicting some of that information. And so because of that, as DA John Chisholm said, the prosecutor's having very serious doubts about it. Right,
so we're having, of course, it's in the midst of a very violent summer, dramatic increase in homicide totals. And here you go, well, here's $10,000, you could put that on a credit card probably to get, if you, with that issue. But what was the fallout? I know Alderman Bob Donovan talked about it, the chief talked about it, starting the sort of the finger pointing that goes on in these cases of who's responsible.
Yep, there certainly was a lot of that going on. It was probably one of the few times in recent months that Alderman Donovan and Chief Flynn have agreed on something. I know Chief Flynn has consistently told the public, media, council members that he understands that people are going to look at the police department and what actions they're taking to combat this crime, but he has consistently called for people to examine other parts of the criminal justice system, including the court system. And so I think when he was on talk radio expressing that, he at that point when he was talking, I don't think that there was a full reporting at that point as to why this decision was made and how it came about, but obviously he called it very disheartening to see this type of suspect released.
Talk about some of the backstory here and what's going on, because if Donovan running for mayor, you've got all these other machinations in the background.
So he's not just another alderman who's discussing this issue. He's someone who wants to run for mayor, is running for mayor, doesn't have a lot of money. He's being, in terms of the amount of money he has, Mayor Barrett has $20 for every dollar that Alderman Donovan has. So it's important for him to keep his name out there. And each of these incidents he jumps on to, and he's able to generate free media. He gets on the front page of the paper. He ends up on the TV news and everything else. I mean, it's an opportunity for him to try to contrast himself with Tom Barrett, and that's going to continue until the election next year.
Right. Well, do you think, guys, is this a potent issue? I mean, we seem to have these headlines often. We had a few weeks ago the elderly woman who was raped after getting off the bus and had to wait for hours and hours for the police to return. We've got 13-year-olds being shot after the fireworks. Is this something that for Donovan can draw votes and become an important issue?
It's happening during the summer, and a lot of people aren't tuned in right now. So, but it is an ongoing problem, and so it's something that's going to keep on being brought up. And I wouldn't be surprised. There's talk that Senator Lena Taylor is going to get into the race too. So you would have 2 people criticizing Barrett, one from the left and one from the right. And it's expected that a third-party group will come in and use these issues to drive up Mayor Barrett's negatives, to try to make him vulnerable. I mean, he has a very large war chest. It's expected that he's going to win, but this is the way to go about beating him.
Yeah, let's talk about one last point here. There's a couple things announced in the past few weeks, which what strikes me is, so they'll announce, the department and officials will say, there's not a big problem with our pursuit policy, but then they'll announce, here's our new Batman tool to help get people who are fleeing the case, or we're doing okay with prosecution, but here's our special gun prosecution unit that we're sort of reviving this new effort. What's been the reaction to those sorts of things that they're pushing now to try to get their handle on what's going on?
Specifically with the Star Chase technology, the GPS trackers for fleeing cars, the department says that's something they've been looking at since May.
This is the Batman thing, right?
Yes.
They shoot it and it lands on the car, and now they know where the car is going.
There's an adhesive. Yeah. There are some real concerns about cost. right about $5,000 for a unit. There's some concerns about accuracy. There's going to need to be some training on how you can use it. In some of the reports I've read, and again, this is still fairly new technology in that it's not widespread at this point. It's not widespread usage across the country. And so the reports that I've read, talking to officers who have used it, they've had some trouble getting it to fire accurately. It has a warm-up period, so sometimes when they think they're going to use it, they warm it up, but then they end up the car's already gone,
Right.
or maybe they think they're able to pull the car over, and then it kind of slows down, and they have to restart it, and it's not able to fire when they want it to.
Yeah, so just briefly, do you see any sort of disconnect at all here of, on the one hand, saying, well, this isn't a big issue, everything's under control, and then you see these proposals and initiatives to address the issue that's under control?
Sure, and it's a hard thing for, Alderman Donovan doesn't have to put together a program and say, this is what my crime proposal is. He's able to jump onto each incident and put them together and say that we have a problem. The mayor, meanwhile, has to make the case that things are, under control to some degree. But clearly, the number of murders is up, and crime is certainly a problem right now.